Let me begin by sharing a fundamental truth I observed throughout my years of working with individuals facing the deepest of human struggles. Meaning is not something we stumble upon like a precious stone on a path. It is something we must actively construct even in, and perhaps especially in, our darkest moments. Consider for a moment the paradox that defines our modern existence. We live in an age of unprecedented comfort and technological advancement, yet the void within seems to grow deeper. Many of you sitting here today might recognize this peculiar emptiness, a sensation that despite all your achievements, something essential remains missing. This is what I call the existential vacuum, a state where one has the means to live, but no meaning to live for. Think of the executive who has climbed every rung of the corporate ladder only to find himself asking, is this all there is? Or the young professional who has checked all the social boxes of success but lies awake at night, haunted by a sense of purposelessness. These are not signs of failure. They are calls to awakening. Let me share with you an experience from my clinical practice. A young woman once came to me, successful by every external measure, wealthy, attractive, socially admired, yet she was consumed by depression and anxiety. When I asked her what she lived for, she could not answer. Her life was full of things but empty of meaning. Through our work together, she discovered that meaning cannot be pursued directly. It must ensue from dedicating ourselves to something greater than ourselves. This brings me to a crucial point. The solution to negative emotions and lack of meaning isn't found in the pursuit of happiness. In fact, the more desperately we chase happiness, the more it eludes us. This is what I call the happiness trap. Happiness, my friends, is like a butterfly. The more you chase it, the more it flies away. But if you turn your attention to other things, to creating meaning through action and responsibility, it comes and softly sits on your shoulder. Consider this. Every crisis carries within it both danger and opportunity. When you feel overwhelmed by negative emotions, anxiety, depression, fear, or emptiness, you stand at a crossroads. One path leads to despair, the other to transformation. The choice lies not in eliminating these emotions, but in your response to them. Let me illustrate this with another case. A man who lost his wife to cancer came to me, consumed by grief and anger at the meaninglessness of his loss. Through our discussions, he came to understand that his suffering was not meaningless. It was an opportunity to honor his love for his wife by helping others who face similar losses. He started a support group for grieving spouses, and in helping others, he found his own path to healing. His pain didn't diminish, but it acquired meaning, and that made it bearable. This brings us to a fundamental principle. Meaning can be found in three primary ways: through creative work, through experiencing something or encountering someone, and through the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. Notice that none of these depends on external circumstances. Even in the most restricted conditions, we retain the freedom to choose our attitude. Think of your negative emotions as messengers. Anxiety might be telling you it's time to face a challenge you've been avoiding. Depression might be signaling that your current path doesn't align with your values. Anger might be highlighting an injustice that needs addressing. Instead of trying to silence these messengers, learn to listen to them. They often point the way toward meaning. Let me share with you a powerful exercise I use with my patients. When faced with a difficult situation, ask yourself, what is life asking of me in this moment? Notice that this shifts the perspective from what can I get from life to what can life get from me. This simple reframing can transform your relationship with challenging circumstances. Consider the story of an artist I worked with who suffered from chronic pain. Instead of allowing her condition to define her life negatively, she chose to use it as material for her art. She created powerful works that spoke to others who suffered, turning her personal struggle into a source of connection and meaning for countless others. Her pain didn't disappear, but it became meaningful through her creative response to it. This leads us to another crucial insight. Meaning is often found in connection, not just with others, but with a purpose that transcends our individual existence. When we commit ourselves to a cause greater than our own comfort or happiness, we often find that happiness arrives as an unexpected side effect. Let me be clear, this is not about denying or suppressing negative emotions. It's about understanding that these emotions are part of the human experience, not aberrations to be eliminated. They are the chiaroscuro that gives depth and meaning to the painting of our lives. Without darkness, how would we recognize light? I've observed that many people today suffer not from the intensity of their emotions, but from their attempts to avoid emotional pain altogether. They numb themselves with various distractions, excessive work, social media, substances, or endless entertainment. But in numbing the pain, they also numb their capacity for joy and meaning. Consider this paradox. The more we try to avoid suffering, the more we suffer. The more we open ourselves to the full range of human experience, including pain, the more capable we become of experiencing profound meaning and joy. This is what I call the tragic optimism, the ability to say yes to life despite its tragic aspects. Let me share another case that illustrates this principle. A successful businessman came to me with what he called executive burnout. He had spent decades building his company, but now felt empty and directionless. Through our work together, he realized that his pursuit of success had become an end in itself, disconnected from any larger purpose. When he redirected his business skills towards solving social problems he cared about, his energy and sense of purpose returned. His work didn't change, but its meaning did. This brings us to a vital point about meaning. It's not about what happens to us, but about what we do with what happens to us. Every situation, no matter how difficult, contains within it the possibility of meaning. Our task is not to ask why this is happening to us, but to ask what we can make of it, what we can learn from it, how we can use it to grow or to help others. Think of meaning as a muscle that needs exercise. Each time we choose to respond to difficulty with courage, each time we choose to help others despite our own pain, each time we choose to create something beautiful from our struggles, we strengthen our capacity for meaningful living. Let me address a common misconception. Finding meaning doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic life changes. Meaning can be found in the smallest acts of kindness, in the quiet moments of connection, in the daily choices to act with integrity and purpose. Sometimes the most meaningful moments are the ones that seem insignificant at first glance. Consider the hospital nurse who takes an extra moment to hold the hand of a frightened patient, the teacher who stays after school to help a struggling student, the neighbor who checks on an elderly person living alone. These simple acts create ripples of meaning that extend far beyond the immediate moment. Now, let me address something crucial, the relationship between responsibility and meaning. Many people today feel powerless in the face of global challenges and personal difficulties. But responsibility, the ability to respond, is always within our grasp. Even in situations where we cannot change the circumstances, we can choose our response to them. I worked with a man who became paralyzed in an accident. Initially, he saw his condition as the end of any meaningful life. But gradually, he began to see that while he couldn't change his physical condition, he could choose his attitude toward it. He began mentoring other individuals with spinal injuries, writing about his experiences, and advocating for accessibility rights. His physical circumstances hadn't changed, but his relationship to them had transformed completely. This brings us to another vital principle, the importance of self-transcendence. The most meaningful life is one that reaches beyond personal concerns to touch the lives of others. This doesn't mean sacrificing your own well-being. Rather, it means understanding that your well-being is inextricably linked to your contribution to the world. Consider how different our approach to negative emotions becomes when we view them through this lens. Anxiety about the future becomes an opportunity to prepare and to help others prepare. Sadness about loss becomes a way to connect with and support others who grieve. Anger about injustice becomes fuel for positive social change. Let me share one more case that illustrates this transformation. A young man came to me struggling with severe social anxiety. Instead of focusing solely on reducing his anxiety, we explored how he could use his understanding of social fear to help others. He started a support group for socially anxious teenagers, and in the process of helping them, his own anxiety began to diminish. Not because he was trying to get rid of it, but because he had found a meaningful way to use it. This leads us to a fundamental truth about the human condition. We are meaning-seeking creatures. When we fail to find meaning, we create substitutes. Addiction, aggression, depression, or endless distraction. But these substitutes never satisfy our fundamental need for purpose and significance. Think of meaning as a compass rather than a destination. It's not something we achieve once and for all, but rather a continuous process of orientation and reorientation. Each day presents new opportunities to choose meaning over meaninglessness, purpose over pointlessness, engagement over escape. As we approach the conclusion of our time together, let me leave you with this thought. Your negative emotions are not your enemies, and your search for meaning is not a sign of weakness or failure. They are integral parts of the human journey, signposts pointing toward growth and transformation. Remember, the question is not what is the meaning of life in some abstract universal sense. The question is what is the meaning of your life right now in this moment. And the answer to that question lies not in philosophical speculation, but in the actions you take, the attitudes you choose, and the way you respond to life's challenges. You have within you the capacity to transform your negative emotions into catalysts for growth, your struggles into sources of strength, your pain into purpose. This transformation doesn't happen through positive thinking alone, but through positive action. through engaging with life's challenges in ways that create meaning not just for yourself, but for others. As you leave this gathering today, I challenge you to ask yourself, not what can life give me, but what does life ask of me? Not how can I be happy, but how can I make my life meaningful? The answers to these questions will not come all at once, but they will come as you take steps, however small, toward living with purpose and responsibility. Remember, every moment offers a choice to shrink from life's challenges or to meet them with courage and purpose. Every difficulty presents an opportunity to discover meaning. Every setback, a chance to demonstrate resilience. Every negative emotion, a potential source of growth and understanding. You're not here merely to seek happiness or avoid pain, but to find and fulfill the unique meaning that your life holds. That meaning is waiting to be discovered in your relationships, in your work, in your response to suffering, and in your contribution to the world. The path to meaning may not be easy, but it is always available, always possible, always worth pursuing. Let us move forward, not in pursuit of an impossible perfect happiness, but in the knowledge that a life rich in meaning can embrace both joy and sorrow, both success and failure, both pleasure and pain. In this embrace lies the key to transforming our negative emotions and finding the deep, sustaining meaning that makes life not just bearable. Consider what happens when we face moments of deep despair or overwhelming anxiety. These are not merely psychological disturbances to be medicated away. They are existential wake-up calls. They signal that something in our life requires attention, transformation, or deeper understanding. When we feel that crushing weight of meaninglessness, it's often because we've lost connection with our fundamental responsibility to life itself. Let me share with you the story of a remarkable individual I encountered in my practice. A woman who had everything society told her should make her happy. A prestigious career, financial security, a loving family. Yet she found herself waking up each morning with a profound sense of emptiness. Through our work together, we discovered that her emptiness stemmed not from what she lacked, but from what she had stopped giving. She had become so focused on accumulating the markers of success that she had forgotten her deeper calling, to use her unique gifts in service of others. This brings us to a crucial understanding about the nature of meaning. It cannot be pursued directly like happiness or success. Meaning must ensue from our engagement with life's challenges and our commitment to something greater than ourselves. Think of it like the shadow that follows you. The moment you try to chase it, it moves away. But when you walk toward a goal that transcends your immediate desires, it naturally follows. I've observed a particular phenomenon in our modern world that I call the success trap. People achieve everything they thought they wanted, only to find themselves asking, is this all there is? This question isn't a sign of ingratitude or failure. It's an invitation to deeper understanding. It's life asking us to move beyond the superficial metrics of success to the deeper measures of meaning. Let me illustrate this with another case study. A young entrepreneur came to me after selling his startup for millions. He had achieved his dream, but instead of feeling fulfilled, he felt more empty than ever. Through our discussions, he realized that his drive for success had been an attempt to prove his worth to others. When he redirected his energy towards solving social problems he deeply cared about, his experience of life transformed. The money and success remain, but they became tools for meaningful action rather than ends in themselves. This leads us to another vital principle, the importance of what I call creative tension. This is the gap between where we are and where we want to be, between what life is and what it could be. Many people try to eliminate this tension through various forms of escape. Addiction, endless entertainment, or numbing routines. But this tension is not our enemy. It's the source of our creative energy, our drive to grow and contribute. Consider how differently we might approach our negative emotions if we saw them as signals of this creative tension. Anxiety might indicate not that something is wrong with us, but that we're on the edge of growth. Depression might signal not a chemical imbalance alone, but the need to realign our lives with our values. Anger might point not to our dysfunction, but to our deep care about something that needs to change. I worked with an artist who suffered from severe anxiety attacks. Instead of seeing these attacks as purely pathological, we explored them as messages from her creative unconscious. She began to notice that her anxiety peaked when she was avoiding her true artistic calling, when she was creating work to please others rather than expressing her authentic vision. As she learned to listen to her anxiety rather than fight it, it became a guide toward more meaningful creative expression. This brings us to another crucial understanding, the role of responsibility in finding meaning. In our contemporary culture, we often speak of rights and privileges, but we speak less of responsibilities. Yet it is precisely in taking responsibility not just for our actions, but for finding meaning in our circumstances, that we discover our power to transform our lives. Let me share the story of a man who lost his job during an economic downturn. Initially, he was devastated, seeing himself as a victim of circumstances beyond his control. But as we worked together, he began to ask different questions. Instead of why did this happen to me, he started asking, what is this situation calling me to become? He used his unexpected free time to mentor young professionals, sharing his decades of experience. This led to the creation of a successful consulting practice, focused on helping others navigate career transitions. His circumstances hadn't changed, but his relationship to them had transformed completely. This illustrates what I call the meaning perspective shift. Moving from asking what we can get from life to asking what life is asking of us. This shift changes everything. Our problems become opportunities for service. Our struggles become sources of wisdom we can share with others. Our pain becomes a bridge for connecting with those who suffer similarly. Consider the implications of this shift for how we handle negative emotions. When we feel overwhelmed by sadness, instead of asking, how can I feel better, we might ask, how can this sadness deepen my understanding of others who suffer? When anxiety grips us, instead of asking, how can I get rid of this feeling, we might ask, what is this anxiety trying to teach me about what matters most? I've seen this transformation countless times in my clinical work. A woman struggling with chronic pain discovered that her experience gave her unique insight into helping others cope with physical challenges. A man dealing with grief found purpose in creating support systems for those facing similar losses. A teenager struggling with social anxiety became an advocate for mental health awareness in schools. This brings us to another vital principle, the importance of what I call meaningful suffering. Not all suffering can be avoided, but all suffering can be given meaning through our response to it. This doesn't mean we should seek out suffering or glorify it, but rather that we should understand its potential role in our growth and development. Think of suffering like resistance in physical exercise. Without resistance, our muscles cannot grow stronger. Similarly, without facing and working through challenges, our capacity for meaning and purpose cannot develop fully. The key is not to eliminate resistance, but to engage with it purposefully. Let me share another case that illustrates this principle. A middle-aged woman came to me after being diagnosed with a chronic illness. Her initial response was understandable despair. But as we worked together, she began to see how her experience could serve others. She started a support group for people with similar conditions, wrote about her experiences, and became an advocate for patient rights. Her illness remained a challenge, but it became a meaningful challenge, one that allowed her to make a unique contribution to the world. This leads us to another crucial understanding, the relationship between meaning and connection. In our increasingly digital world, we can be constantly connected yet feel profoundly alone. True connection, the kind that generates meaning, comes not from passive consumption of others' lives, but from active engagement in shared purpose and mutual support. Consider how this understanding might transform our approach to technology and social media. Instead of using these tools to escape from our negative emotions or to compare ourselves with others, we might use them to find and create communities of meaning, to share our struggles and insights in ways that help others, to organize for positive change. I worked with a young man who spent countless hours on social media, feeling increasingly isolated and depressed. When he began using these platforms to share his experiences with mental health and connect with others facing similar challenges, his relationship with technology and with himself transformed. The same tools that had contributed to his isolation became instruments for creating meaningful connection and support. This brings us to what I call the paradox of meaning. The more we focus on our own happiness and fulfillment, the more these things elude us. But when we focus on contributing to something greater than ourselves, on serving others, on creating value in the world, happiness and fulfillment often rise as natural byproducts. Think of meaning as a garden rather than a destination. It requires constant attention, regular nurturing, and patient cultivation. Some seasons may seem barren, while others burst with growth. The key is to remain engaged in the process, understanding that meaning grows through our consistent commitment to purposeful action. Let me share one final case that brings together many of these principles. A retired teacher came to me feeling that her life had lost purpose. Her identity had been so wrapped up in her profession that retirement felt like a kind of death. Through our work together, she began to see that her calling to educate hadn't ended. It had evolved. She started a program teaching life skills to adults in prison, combining her educational expertise with a new population in need. Her sense of purpose not only returned, but expanded in ways she hadn't imagined possible. One of the most challenging aspects of modern existence is what I call the immediacy trap, our tendency to seek immediate solutions to profound existential challenges. We live in an age of instant gratification where quick fixes and surface-level solutions are marketed as panaceas for our deepest struggles. But meaningful transformation requires something different. It demands patience, persistence, and the willingness to engage with our difficulties rather than escape from them. Let me share with you the story of a physician I worked with who found himself increasingly disconnected from his work. Each day felt like a mechanical progression of tasks despite his obvious success in his field. His initial impulse was to change careers entirely, seeking that elusive something else that might reignite his sense of purpose. However, through our work together, we discovered that the issue wasn't his profession, but his relationship to it. He had lost touch with the fundamental meaning of healing, caught up in the administrative demands and technological aspects of modern medicine. Instead of fleeing from his situation, he began to transform it from within. He started spending an extra few minutes with each patient, not just treating their symptoms, but truly listening to their stories. He initiated a program in his hospital focusing on the human aspects of medical care. Gradually, his work transformed from a source of emptiness to a wellspring of meaning, not because the external circumstances changed, but because his approach to them evolved. This brings us to a crucial understanding about the nature of transformation. It often occurs not through dramatic external changes, but through subtle shifts in our relationship to our experiences. Consider how this applies to our negative emotions. When we feel anxiety, our instinct might be to suppress it or escape from it. But what if we approached it with curiosity instead? What if we ask ourselves, what is this anxiety trying to tell me about what matters most to me? I worked with a performing artist who suffered from severe stage fright. Instead of seeing this fear as an enemy to be vanquished, we explored it as a signal of how deeply she cared about her art, how meaningful her performance was to her. As she learned to embrace her anxiety as a sign of her commitment rather than a flaw in her character, something remarkable happened. The anxiety didn't disappear, but it transformed from a paralyzing force into energizing tension that actually enhanced her performances. This leads us to what I call the paradox of acceptance. Often, it's our resistance to negative emotions that gives them their power over us. When we accept them as natural parts of our human experience, as potential guides toward meaning, they begin to transform naturally. This isn't passive resignation, but active engagement with our full range of emotional experiences. Consider the case of a business leader who came to me struggling with profound guilt over decisions he'd made during an economic crisis. Instead of trying to rationalize away his feelings or suppress them, we explored how his guilt reflected his deep sense of responsibility and care for his employees. This recognition led him to create new programs for supporting displaced workers and to advocate for more ethical business practices in his industry. His guilt became a catalyst for meaningful action rather than a source of paralysis. This brings us to another vital principle, the importance of what I call meaningful adversity. In our comfort-oriented culture, we often view all forms of difficulty as problems to be eliminated, but some forms of struggle are essential for growth, meaning, and genuine fulfillment. The key is learning to distinguish between unnecessary suffering that we can and should alleviate and meaningful adversity that we need to engage with and learn from. I worked with an athlete recovering from a career-ending injury. His initial focus was solely on his loss, the competitions he could no longer participate in, the goals he could no longer pursue. But as we explored this situation more deeply, he began to discover new possibilities for meaning. He started coaching young athletes, focusing particularly on those recovering from injuries. His own experience of loss and recovery became a source of wisdom and guidance for others. The injury remained a genuine loss, but it also became a gateway to a different kind of meaningful contribution. This illustrates what I call the transformation of tragedy. We cannot always choose our circumstances, but we can always choose our response to them. This choice, how we respond to what life presents us, is where meaning resides. It's not about finding meaning despite our circumstances, but often through them. Let me share another powerful example. A woman who lost her child to a rare disease could have been consumed by bitterness and despair, and indeed she experienced these feelings deeply. But she chose to channel her grief into action, creating a foundation that funds research into rare childhood diseases and supports families facing similar challenges. Her loss didn't become less painful, but it became meaningful through her response to it. This brings us to another crucial understanding, the relationship between meaning and action. Meaning isn't something we think our way into, it's something we live our way into. Too often we wait for meaning to reveal itself before we act, when in fact meaningful action is what reveals meaning to us. Consider how this principle might transform our approach to depression and existential crisis. Instead of waiting to feel better before engaging with life, we might need to engage with life in order to feel better. This doesn't mean denying or suppressing our negative emotions, but rather acting alongside them, allowing our actions to gradually reshape our emotional landscape. I worked with a man who had become isolated and depressed following his retirement. Despite not feeling particularly motivated or hopeful, he agreed to volunteer once a week at a local food bank. Initially, it was just going through the motions, but gradually, through the simple act of showing up and helping others, he began to rediscover his sense of purpose. The depression didn't magically disappear, but it became manageable as he built a new foundation of meaningful engagement with life. This leads us to what I call the responsibility principle. In our therapeutic culture, we often focus on healing ourselves before helping others. But sometimes the most powerful healing comes through taking responsibility for contributing to others' well-being. This doesn't mean ignoring our own needs, but rather understanding that our well-being is inextricably linked to our contribution to the larger world. Think about how this might change our approach to anxiety about the future. Instead of becoming paralyzed by our fears about what might happen, we could ask ourselves, what can I do right now to contribute to the kind of future I want to see? This shifts us from passive worry to active engagement, from helplessness to responsibility. Let me share the story of an environmental scientist who was experiencing severe eco-anxiety. Rather than allowing her fears about climate change to overwhelm her, she channeled them into creating educational programs for young people about environmental stewardship. Her anxiety didn't disappear. In fact, she remained deeply concerned about environmental issues, but it became a source of motivation for meaningful action rather than a source of paralysis. This brings us to another vital understanding, the importance of what I call meaningful community. In our increasingly individualistic society, we often try to find meaning in isolation, but meaning is inherently relational. It grows and deepens through our connections with others, through shared purpose and mutual support. I worked with a group of individuals who had all experienced similar losses. What began as a traditional support group evolved into a community of meaning, where members not only supported each other, but collaborated on projects to help others facing similar challenges. Their individual pain became a source of collective purpose. Their personal struggle. As we continue this journey together, remember that the search for meaning isn't about eliminating negative emotions or achieving some perfect state of happiness. It's about engaging fully with life in all its complexity, finding purpose in our struggles, and using our unique experiences, even the painful ones, to contribute to the greater good. Your life, with all its challenges and complications, is not a problem to be solved, but a calling to be answered. Every difficulty you face is not just a burden to bear, but potentially a bridge to deeper meaning and more authentic engagement with life. The question is not how can I avoid pain, but how can I use everything life gives me, including pain, to create something meaningful. I worked with a man who had survived a severe bout of depression. Once he began to recover, his initial impulse was to put the experience behind him and never look back. But gradually he realized that his journey through the darkness gave him unique insights that could help others. He began speaking openly about his experience, first in small support groups, then in larger venues. His willingness to share his story helped break down stigma and showed others that recovery was possible. His past pain became a present purpose. This leads us to another crucial understanding, what I call the integration principle. True transformation doesn't mean leaving our negative experiences behind. It means integrating them into a larger narrative of meaning. Our wounds can become windows through which we see and understand others' pain more clearly. Our struggles can become the very tools we use to help others navigate similar challenges. Consider the case of a teacher who had always struggled with learning differences. Instead of trying to hide this aspect of her experience, she used her understanding of learning challenges to revolutionize her teaching methods. She created innovative approaches that helped students who, like her, didn't fit the traditional academic mold. Her perceived weakness became her unique strength. Her difficulty transformed into her gift to others. As we approach our final moments together, let me share what I consider the most important principle of all, what I call the perpetual possibility. No matter where you are in your life, no matter how deep your struggles or how persistent your negative emotions, the possibility for meaning is always present. It may not look like what you expected. It may not come in the form you anticipated, but it is always there, waiting to be discovered through your response to life's challenge. Think of meaning not as a destination, but as a direction. We don't arrive at meaning once and for all. We move toward it through our choices, our actions, our responses to what life presents us. Even in our darkest moments, we can take one small step in the direction of meaning by asking, how can I use this experience to grow, to understand, to help others? Let me leave you with this final story. A woman in her 70s came to me, feeling that she had wasted her life, that it was too late to find meaning. Through our work together, she began to see that her very sense of regret could become a powerful tool for helping younger people avoid similar patterns. She started mentoring young professionals, sharing her hard-earned wisdom about balancing ambition with authenticity, success with significance. Her past regrets became future possibilities for others. As you leave here today, remember these fundamental truths. Your negative emotions are not obstacles to meaning. They are potential pathways to deeper understanding and more authentic engagement with life. Your struggles are not impediments to purpose. They are the raw materials from which purpose can be crafted. Your pain is not meaningless. It can become the source of healing for others who suffer similarly. The challenge before you is not to eliminate difficulty from your life, but to transform difficulty into meaning. Not to escape from negative emotions, but to channel them into purposeful action. Not to achieve some perfect state of happiness, but to create meaning even and especially in the midst of struggle. Remember that meaning is not something that happens to you. It's something that happens through you, through your choices, your actions, your responses to life's challenges. Every moment offers a new opportunity to choose meaning over meaninglessness, purpose over paralysis, engagement over escape. As you return to your daily lives, carry with you this understanding. You are not just a recipient of circumstances, but a creator of meaning. Your life, with all its complexities and challenges, is not a problem to be solved, but a calling to be answered. Every difficulty you face is an opportunity to demonstrate the human capacity for transformation. Every struggle a chance to show that meaning can be found even in the most unlikely places. Go forth with the knowledge that you have within you everything you need to create meaning from whatever life presents. Your negative emotions can become your greatest teachers. Your struggles, your most powerful gifts to the world. Your pain, a bridge to deeper connection with others. The journey ahead may not be easy, but it will be rich with possibility for those willing to engage fully with life's challenges, to transform difficulty into meaning, to use their unique experiences, even the painful ones, to contribute to the greater good. Let this be not the end of our exploration, but the beginning of your renewed engagement with life's deepest questions and possibilities. The path to meaning lies before you, waiting to be discovered. One choice, one action, one moment at a time. Thank you, my friends, for sharing this journey of understanding with me. May you go forth with courage, wisdom, and an unwavering commitment to creating meaning in your lives and in the lives of others. Remember, as long as we have the capacity to respond to life's challenges with purpose and dignity, the possibility for meaning remains endless.